Welcome to the Untangling Web3 podcast. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Sunny Liu, the visionary co-founder and CEO of VeChain. With a background as the former CIO of Louis Vuitton China and over 15 years of tech expertise, Sunny is pioneering the use of blockchain for enterprise solutions and sustainability. Under his leadership, VeChain is transforming global supply chains and driving cutting-edge initiatives like VeBetterDAO, which incentivizes sustainable actions through blockchain technology. Today, we'll be speaking to Sunny about DAOs, or Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. Sunny, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Yeah, very glad to be here. We can have a lot of fun things to talk about: DAO and blockchain, crypto, sustainability, anything. So yeah,
I
enjoy
think the problem's going to be keeping it dialed. When I first met you, it was a few months ago now. I remember we started speaking about the crypto space and how it's changed, and we ended up speaking for hours because you've been such a big player in the ecosystem for so long. You've got so many stories and so many insights about what it used to be like, most of which we wouldn't have time if we had like 12 hours to record this. But, let's go into some of it. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got into crypto and how VeChain came about all those years ago?
Oh yeah, very long time story actually. Actually, last year was my 10 years anniversary, so this year is already 11th year to be in the crypto side.
Congrats.
And I remember that I was working Louis Vuitton, and also I was a game player, and I play World of Warcraft most of the time. And I don't really like the environment, like the regime of World of Warcraft China. So I was trying to
Mm,
play with my friends in West Coast, in the European region,
mhm.
the West Coast region, East Coast region of US. And I tried to catch up with my friends, and I tried to buy some coins, right? But I didn't have a dollars, and so somebody offered me like, okay, you can use Bitcoin. It was like $1 each back in 2012, and I was like, what a is a scam or something? So start to study about the Bitcoin, and later on, I did actually get scammed. Actually, I
Oh
was
no.
trying to buy the Bitcoins through the Taobao, and the guy never sent me the Bitcoin, but I lost about $100 or something. I tried to buy
Oh.
100 Bitcoin. But later on, get to know about Bitcoin, and get to know about Bitcoin talk, and start to meet lots of people. And by the way, because I was working Louis Vuitton, I got quite a good opportunity to travel around. So every time I travel to a different city, I always try to find a Bitcoin meetup, a crypto meetup at that time, and get to know more about Bitcoin and everything else. So that's how basically how I get started.
So that seems like you and Vitalik have that in common because he started getting into the decentralized nature of
Oh,
crypto because his World of Warcraft player got nerfed, right? But yours was about the transaction.
I'm not a warlock player. Let's put this way. I'm more like an assassin or more like a knight, that kind of thing. But yeah, and also in 2015, firstly, I made the first bucket of money through the
Mhm.
Bitcoin mining, and I feel like, well, it's the right time. I should start to do something on my own. And also, I was managing a global project in Louis Vuitton. It's called Track and Trace. So I'm
Mm.
thinking about, okay, what about if we use a blockchain to replace the traditional database? So we should do something more even more interesting. So that's how VeChain started. Actually, I'm an engineer, I'm a technical guy, and I choose the name pretty like a direct meaning with direct meaning. So VeChain stands for verification blockchain. So we try to use blockchain to verify the global project like a track and trace inside Louis
Mm.
Vuitton, and that's how VeChain started.
That's super interesting as a way in, and obviously having been more or less an OG of the crypto and Bitcoin space, right? 11 years is quite a long tenure in the space for anyone. That makes you kind of one of the gurus, the oldest living gurus in the space, in my mind. And yeah, it's interesting that you had that way in with Louis Vuitton and the kind of one of the traditional applications of blockchain in the kind of supply chain track and trace world. But now you've moved on to something that's kind of when we spoke to Antonio Senatore, your CTO, a couple of months ago, he espoused this really big grand vision that really inspired us for VeChain. I think it's really exciting, and I think today I really like to dig deeper in one of those aspects, which is the DAO aspect. So we've mentioned VeBetterDAO, and I'm sure we'll get into the specifics of that a little bit more later, but for our audience, could you just give us a brief overview, like what's the explain like I'm 5 version of what is a DAO? Okay, what is it? How does it differ from a traditional organizational structure, and why should we care about them?
Yeah, well, that's actually quite a tough challenge, right? When we think about a DAO, it's not that easy
Sorry.
but I will try. So firstly, DAO represents decentralized autonomous organization, in the direct meaning. It's I would say it's a new way to organize the different parties to, let's say, make a decision and work out towards the same goal, those type of things. And if we try to use a very simple language, it's just, you kind of use a voting power to decide anything within this organization for the best interest of efficiency and the smart decisions, and eventually to achieve the goal. So yeah, well, still, I don't think the 5-year-old could understand that. But it's like within your family, if you try to go to a movie with your kids, with your spouses, and then let's vote what kind of movie we should go for. It is that family animation, is or like a Marvel movies. So that's basically a typical DAO use case.
Yeah, that is a really good description, I think, and some very clever 5-year-olds, I'm sure, would just about be able to grasp what you're saying. Because again, you're talking about it in an abstract term, right? It's about decision making. How do you come to consensus on something as a group, which is part of the core of what blockchain is all about, right? Consensus mechanisms. Right. How do we agree on the state of a blockchain? Well, DAOs are kind of more general in a sense. How do you agree on making decisions? And we've had a few very famous examples. So the first one I was aware of was the Ethereum, the DAO that famously raised 150 million pounds and then got hacked. That's maybe a little bit less successful, but and then you have recent things like the Constitution DAO, right, which very nearly bought a copy of the Constitution. So I think they're definitely gaining in popularity. Moving away from the abstract, what does it actually mean on a technical level? Like, what are the underpinnings from a technical perspective of what these DAOs actually are then?
Well, actually, there are many technical elements, in terms of the DAO, or to make the DAO working. Number one, for sure, is a smart contracts, right? Smart contract is a typical technical terms on blockchain. I don't think we need to explain what a smart contract is, but I would say smart contract is the backbone of a DAO. Basically, smart contract automate processes like governance, voting, funding, even the rewards distribution. So once the smart contract deploy on the blockchain, and then it's kind of the smart contract will execute predefined rules, all of the predefined rules without any human interventions. And for sure, the blockchain is the infrastructure to support the smart contract, to guarantee the transparency, in immutability, the publicity. So all of the, let's say, the technical features of the blockchain is kind of guarantee the smart contract, and also the other things. And also decentralized voting mechanism is one of the key elements. Also, you gotta make sure the voting cannot be manipulated, cannot be centralized, decided by only a small group of people. But we do need like the decentralized voting mechanism to make sure everyone got a chip in, everyone got to say something, everyone can have a power to decide something, and also make sure the decision can be decided by the majority of the entire community. And also the governance token acting as carrier of those voting mechanism. How do you guarantee the voting mechanism is decentralized? You're going to use a governance token inside of the DAO to make sure people using the token to make the voting to be done. Well, actually, there are many other things like the treasury management, the general tokenomics. Oh, a very important thing is about the oracles, because DAO is, let's say, running on the virtual world, right? Running on the blockchain. And you got to have an oracle to be able to connect with the real world. either you get the real world input to be as the source, as a reference, as like all of the information you need to make your decision, or as a result, you need to have a result to be or decision to be executed in the real world. So basically, Oracle is acting a very important element also in the DAO to be make sure to be connecting with between the virtual world to the real world. So yeah, there are many other things we can talk about hours.
Yeah, I know, but you've definitely touched on the core components in my mind. Like the one is smart contracts. And if you don't know what a smart contract is, we've got a whole episode kind of explaining the fundamentals of smart contracts. But when you're talking about multiple people interacting all around the world and everyone sometimes having like equal vote, you need some way to govern that, some way to manage that. And that's one of the beauties of, of DAOs is that they use smart contracts. So everyone knows what the terms are, how things will operate in advance. You kind of touched on that transparency. And the second component, if we're talking about an MVP of a DAO in my mind, which you also touched on, is the tokens, the things that actually people use to actually participate in the network. And this is where the whole crypto world kind of comes in. People that are familiar with crypto understand that you're basically using and being rewarded with these tokens to actually participate in the DAO. And then if that's the MVP stuff in my mind, then you go in a bit bigger and broader when you think about oracles. This is how we start to, like you say, go into the real world, actually make our decisions actionable and do something outside of blockchain. And we actually haven't explained what oracles are in detail, but we will do an episode on that at some point. But it's effectively how we get information from the real world onto a blockchain and sometimes action DAO information or blockchain information into the real world. So Sunny, you touched on like some of the benefits there. You talked about transparency being a major benefit, seeing all the transactions and decisions being recorded on blockchain so anyone can audit it. But are there any other kind of primary benefits you see with DAOs when compared with like conventional business models?
Well, I would say there are many benefits, but the biggest one or my favorite one is actually I do believe the power of decentralization. No one is perfect. No one is a Superman, right? No one is like a god, can be able to know everything or decide everything without any kind of, let's say, mistakes. Or so I would say it's really the power of decentralization could make the best decision on many other things, especially in terms of the organization. The current company structure or company or corporation structure has been existing like 500 years or 600 years, something like that. And sure, there were many other whatever from the management process or information system kind of make the efficiency or productivity much more advanced comparing like 500 years ago or 600 years ago. But also we see the typical challenge. The corporate structure becomes more and more reaching to some kind of bottleneck stage, right? Firstly, you gotta have like, especially when your business becomes like super big, and we're not talking about only 5 people or 10 people. We're talking about 10,000 people or 20,000 people, and it's very difficult to, let's say, to listen to everyone's opinion, everyone's advices, or everyone's suggestion, good or bad. So eventually kind of using the hierarchy structure in the normal corporation style, and eventually the fundamental decision or the ultimate decision decided by the board, only like 5 or 6 people, let's put it this way. And those are people actually quite disconnected with the frontier line, with like a groundwork. So how do they do, right? We all know like Elon Musk likes to goes to the manufacturing side, it goes to the SpaceX launch station, talking to the people directly, because that information is very, let's say, essential, critical to some of the decision making. While in a normal corporate structure, it's really difficult to reach over there. So, how to make a decision, in a more effective way or non-hierarchy way, I would say that's number one benefit of the launching the DAO.
Yeah, you've touched on some really like big things there, like the primary benefit being decentralization. Like one, it's enabling everyone to kind of like, well, The decentralization bit is removing these bottlenecks, right? Meaning
Yeah.
it can be 24/7, single points of failure. That's the buzzword when it comes to this stuff. And then
Yeah.
the other one we were talking about was transparency. And I guess this kind of touches on what you were kind of saying, and being a gamer and having a gaming background, the idea of like community involvement. And when you're part of something, you're voting on something, you want to make it like the best thing it can be, and you really like give your heart and soul to something, and that
Yeah.
thing grows and becomes better because of it. I think that's like you said, there's a really powerful benefit of these DAOs. So we've touched on a lot of the good things. You've been doing this firsthand now. What are some of the challenges or drawbacks like typically associated with DAOs?
Yeah, well, that's also, let's say, very obvious. For example, the efficiency. If you try to get the idea from 5,000 people or 10,000 people, it could take ages to go through all of the debates and try to think about overall. But also, not everyone has, for example, not everyone is expert in some of the territory. Give an example, one of the common model or use case of the DAO right now is about the crowdfunding or investment, right? But not everyone is expert in terms of the venture capital or in terms of even think about like a treasury allocation. Let's say we wanted to go for some marketing events, but not everyone is a marketing expert, right? Not everyone understands is the token 2049 is a good event or consensus is better event. Nobody are able to there are, let's say, limited people with that kind of knowledge, with that kind of expertise are able to make the best decision. So I think the typical challenge is how do we get to the right people with the right expertise to make the right decision in the right territory. So maybe like NFT with a reputation system could do the work. So instead of giving like equally the voting power to everyone, but some experts may have better or weighted voting power to guarantee the success of the decision making process. So that's I would say the most headache in my mind when we think about some of the decision making process.
Yeah, it's one of those old adages, isn't it? That you have an existing problem, you solve it, and then that creates a whole new set of problems. But it is true, and I just want to touch on the fact that you mentioned how large some of the organizations are in the world. Places, I think Walmart is one of the largest private companies in the
Yeah.
world. They have over 2 million employees. Like, I don't understand how you can govern these things properly and how they are. And yeah, it's a great idea moving to this DAO model where you flatten that hierarchy. You have kind of equal levels of participation based on your stake involved, but then that introduces these new sets of challenges that you mentioned. So maybe just to crystallize this idea, then can we talk about how do these DAOs actually function from a practical perspective? So let's say we have a DAO, we have a bunch of participants, they all have a different amount of the governance tokens, so they have different voting weight, etc. What does that decision making process actually look like? Say someone has a great idea, how do you go from that to this idea actually being executed in practice?
Yeah, well, firstly, let's go back a little bit, like a human nature. One very interesting thing I discover, especially when I'm traveling around, especially in Europe, whatever is a big city like Brussels or the smaller city, very small, like even a small town with only like a few thousands of people, you can find out most of the towns or cities have a unique configurations as an infrastructure, which is kind of like a plaza, right? Actually, the plaza usually you have a signature building is a fountain or is a big church as a symbol, but usually every place has a place called the plaza. And I was wondering like, what is it for, right? It's actually for a town hall meeting, like gathering everyone together. Somebody going to make a proposal to say, oh, I want to change like this, or I want to change like that, or I discovered this problem, maybe we should look for a solution. So that's basically I would say the primitive format, like a DAO. So DAO needs to have a place like a town hall, even virtually, right? It could be a Telegram group, it could be a Reddit thread, it could be different kind of formats. Or actually, the first DAO, I would say, it's Bitcoin Talk, .org. It's a BBS, right? I knew like the young fellows don't even familiar with the concept. What is a BBS? But that's kind of the town hall for everybody can say something. And then, some organizer or like even naturally to be like a leader, find out there was some very, let's say, a hot topic, or clearly it's obvious challenge, impacting the entire community or even entire the project. Then somebody will jump out. It could be anybody, but somebody could jump out like, okay, let's make a proposal, let's address that issue, or let's try to solve some issues, some problems, and then make a proposal and let the people to debate on that. So usually try to make it more efficient, make it more reasonable. There is also we call a heat check process, right? To see like, is it just you, or is it really represent the majority of the community? And after you pass the heat check, then you could be formalized as the proposal. So usually who wrote this proposal, who raised up the proposal, should take a little bit more extra work. Try to pull every information into that. It could be a theoretical reference. It could be reference from the outside of the project, like who has done the similar things, what is the bad or cons and pros analysis, or what is a typical feedback or voice situation in the community, so they can gather together, put into one single article, usually pretty lengthy, and let people to read through all of that. So it's also kind of like a summarize the situation, because usually when you kind of debating with others or discussing something from one topic to another, maybe take a few days or even just a few hours, it could be deviated to some unknown places, right? So this kind of proposal is also acting as a summary to gather all of the information just for the convenience of any kind of readers or voters in the future, and then start to vote about it. People use the governance token to make your decision, to cast your votes. So there are different type of let's say mechanism for the voting. You could be just based on like a POS, like as based on how many tokens you have, you can decide. You can the tokens you have kind of represent the power you're voting. Or we can use a quadratic voting, to giving more balance about the people's votes and also the treasury or the assets you have. Try to avoid the capitalism issue, right? But for sure, it will lead to another situation like a cyber attack, those type of things. But yeah, that's a voting process. And once the decision, the result comes out, either it's get approved or either get rejected, and then it passed to the executional team, like usually it's a technical team, to make that kind of the changes and then implement to everyone. So that's a typical process from the town hall, that kind of format discussion, to a heat check, to a proposal, and to the voting, and to the decision, until the executions.
Yeah, that's a really good job of summarizing the whole process, and I'm glad you took it back to early civilization as well as early Bitcoin civilization, because I definitely feel like there's a connection between how things like Bitcoin and Ethereum work and what you're describing with DAOs. Because as you said, you had the Bitcoin Talk Forum, you have the BIP process, Bitcoin improvement process, and you have the same thing in Ethereum, where you have this community proposal, people attack it and improve it until it's ready for kind of implementation in the wider world. And to me, it sounds like DAOs are a generalization of that world, from where in Bitcoin you have proposals, maybe miners vote on it with the hash power, Ethereum people vote it, validators vote on it with their stake, and now you're opening that up so you don't have to be a blockchain miner or a blockchain validator to do that. You can do it for anything, right? You just need to have this thing to participate. Is that roughly how you see it as well?
Yeah, well, that's we have to show the respect to Ethereum, because Ethereum kind of make smart contract viable, smart contract doable, right? And the smart contract, comparing Bitcoin, Bitcoin is like a purely ledger system, while smart contract is more much more complicated, right? You can make the activity also immutable on the blockchain. That's what the smart contract do. Even still, reminds me that's also a typical challenge to DAO or to that kind of decentralized voting mechanism. Smart contract is still not strong enough. You only can have a very simple logic into the smart contract to be coded, to be executed, predefined rules. And what about the predefined rules could be really complicated, right? Even when we think about the movie, like the whole family goes to a movie, is a Hollywood movie, is Asian movie, is action movie, adventure, scientific fiction or not, or it's drama or not drama. So it could be a lot of the different rules, right? So it's also one of the typical challenge. But still, we should salute to the Ethereum and the EVM and smart contract because that kind of make, let's say, more complicated decision process or complicated proposal can be executed and carry on on the blockchain by the smart contract. So yeah, that's that's why we said smart contract is the backbone of DAO.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's such a big thing that we talked about when we were outlining what a smart contract is and what kind of effects it can have on society. Because there's some people that would say be proponents of smart contracts. You're going to codify the world and everything will be transparent. And you're like, but there's so much gray zone in everything. Like you just said, there's so many different types of movie. Not everything can be codified. Like a big thing would be like when you put in these proposals forward, you don't know. Like it's the unknown, right? How do you monitor if someone has delivered the thing that they proposed? Because there's so many different things that can come up. I imagine that's one of the trickier things when you're talking about DAOs. If something does get voted on, how, say, a year down the line, do you prove that, say, someone executed it the way that was voted on? What if things change? Like a big thing we had in the UK was Brexit, and half the people voted for Brexit. And I imagine that most of those people aren't happy with how it was executed, but it's too late now. We can't bring it back. But to get practical, you're actually running the experiment now. You're running a DAO, basically. We've had Antonio on previously talking about VeBetterDAO, but can you give us, now we know what DAOs are and it's been well explained. What is VeBetterDAO? What is the grand vision and aim of VeBetterDAO?
Well, VeBetterDAO is a typical decentralized marketplace for a specific type of decentralized application. We call it X to Earn. To, let's say, motivate or incentivize individual users to do the right action or better action to make the right contribution eventually as a collective way to sustainability rollouts, simply say about a VeBetterDAO. And the reason we choose DAO, because honestly, we think about the fundamental issues we want to address inside, especially inside of the sustainability. Firstly, sustainability is the biggest consensus of the humankind, right? So everyone knows that's the right thing to do. That's something we have to do. Otherwise, it maybe not us, but our kids, our next generations, going to suffer whatever from the environmental change or the chaotic social organization, whatever. So we know sustainability is the right thing to do, but we also can see it's quite a decentralized challenge, right? So it needs to count on everyone's commitment, everyone's delivery. So give an example. If you save 1 ton of CO2 in California, which has no difference than somebody save 1 ton of CO2 in Philippines or in Vietnam. So basically, it's the same thing, same impact, same result to our Earth. So it's a typical decentralized challenge, which requires, I would say, decentralized solution. So generally speaking, Web3, blockchain, smart contract, and even including the DAO, a typical decentralized autonomous organization is a perfect answer to address that type of the challenge. So that's why we wanted to use the DAO to carry on this type of activities coming from the individual users, coming from everyone, whatever is normal people or Nobel Prize winner or a big corporation or a NGO as association, organization. Everybody can do something, could do different type of the roles in this ecosystem and eventually all work to get a collective and accumulative results as the sustainability implementations. So that's let's say simply to say that's a VeBetterDAO. So we wanted to, let's say, use that DAO as the format to allocate the tokenomics or to allocate the token allocation. It's kind of like a treasury, right? The funds you wanted to allocate to the right people, to the right application, right project. But who's going to make the decision? Is it me or is it VeChain Foundation per se? We wanted to try the way, like, let everyone to make a decision, let everyone to decide, who should be the right decision. You may not be the expert in kind of the developer or technology realization or choose what type of the protocol, but you could be the user. Everybody can be the user, right? Everybody can use a mugshot to drink a coffee, use a Cleanify to pick up the littering, clean up your corner, or use an EVN to charge your EV cars. So everyone can be the user. Then let every user, based on your experience, based on your journey with that application, and then make a decision who's your favorable application, right? And so we design a certain type of the rules inside of the VeBetterDAO to make the user, like the direct user who use those external application, can make a voting power, can make a decision like, okay, what is the next batch of token allocation could it go? Should it go to Cleanify? Should it go to Capaneer? Should it go to NFBC or Bio? Actually, different people has a different choices. So eventually, as a whole, that's a power of decentralization. That's a representation of the power of decentralization, and worked pretty fine so far. And I'm pretty excited about the progress so far.
Yeah, I just want to double click on what you said there, Sonny, because I completely agree. The sustainability problem is such a cross-border and decentralized issue. Like the people that are being hit the hardest are the people with the fewest funds to actually do anything about it, right? It's places in less economically developed countries around the world who don't really necessarily have the available funds to address those issues. And we, in maybe the richer Western society who are causing a lot of the problems, do have the funds. And because we don't see the impact necessarily directly at us, we're actually not doing much about it. So I completely agree with the reasoning why you've gone for this approach. And I love the definition that VeBetterDAO is effectively a treasury to support and back these X to earn apps. And we haven't actually touched on the idea of X to earn apps, but it's such an interesting concept. Like Jack and I have previously talked about micro incentives and how one of the main purposes, or in my mind anyway, of crypto was because it's this efficient payment system. You can actually have these micro incentives, which could lead to micro rewards for small actions. So you talked about a lot of different applications. Could you double click and just really explain one of your favorite applications, for example, and how this X to earn app works in that use case?
Well, I tried as the leader of the VeChain Foundation and also the VeBetterDAO. I try to not be kind of biased for any kind of application. I love them all. Honestly, I love them all. Seriously, because let's say by design, I think not only our own engineers but also those developers, builders from a community, they're really genius. When we picture this idea roughly, and they're able to deliver with those different type of application, but following our time of lives, daily lives, from the beginning, you can wake up and drink a coffee. You can use a recycled mug or use a paper cup or disposable cup. Or when you drive to your work, you can take an EV or not a fossil car. Or when you walk in your lunch break, you can find out what kind of you can pick up the littering from the street and clean up a bit just at your convenience. Even when you finish your work, you go to a supermarket, buy your groceries. You can choose different type of products, right? Is this sustainable one or not sustainable one? Or you can choose recycled bag, or try to not using plastic ones, generating the plastic waste or plastic pollutions. Even before you go to sleep, You can, listen a little bit like audiobooks to save some trees as well. So honestly, all of the different type of X1, I just love them all.
You
And
love them all.
yeah, and I think the most important thing for all of the application, it's like very convenient, very friendly to use for any users. So basically, you don't need to. I would say thanks to all of the we call emerging technology progress, including the AI, including the IoT, it kind of make the feasibility so much there. Like you can just simply to use application, take a few steps, boom, you finish your work and you record your work. And sure, there will be more functionalities or features kind of expecting from the users right now, but starting from simple, starting from easy way, and then you can get things started. And sure, different user, they have a different, again, back a little bit to the voting power, different user have a different preferences. For example, when I travel to Tokyo, I find the Japanese user are really into the cleaning part because like clean up the neighborhood is kind of minted in the DNA. For example, you cannot find any kind of public bin or trash bin in the street of Tokyo or most of the places in Japan because they have a routine, like they carry on their garbage and they can put in the right categories, for the garbage collectors. Or right now for Korean people, that's one thing I just learned from the Korean Blockchain Week. They actually really like the NFBC, like the using the book club things, because they kind of feel like I don't need to go out to do anything. I'm just at my home, and I listen my audiobook, and I can earn rewards. They just love that, right? So yeah, different places, different people, they have a different things. Even though somebody's start to complain, it's also the Korean user. They are complaining mugshot. They like coffee. However, mugshot use the Google Map, right, as a background mapping service, which Google Map is not working pretty well in Korea. They use their own maps, so it kind of giving the challenge to mugshot, like okay, you might have a specific version for Korean users to make sure they can have more accurate coffee shop allocate locations. So that's actually I would consider as the power of decentralization. So users are able to say something to the builders, to the developers, and then the user will drive the needs, using the needs, leverage eventually the delivery of those applications.
When you talk about this more lateral structure, it also means that you get direct interaction with your potential user base using these DAOs, which makes so much sense. So on that mugshot one, can you explain to me how that actually works? Because what has coffee drinking got to do with sustainability? What's the X there and what's the earn there? Could you give us like a work through of how that works?
Yeah, well, firstly, from the user journey, it's pretty simple. You take a coffee, and if you choose to use a recycled mug, other than the paper cup or plastic cup, and you take a photo, boom, you get the rewards right away. And also, for sure, they also have a different options. Like if you at a coffee shop, you can choose a different option, different button inside of the mugshot to say, oh, I can choose like based on my geographical location. And I can choose, oh, I'm in this coffee shop, I'm in this Starbucks, I'm in that Costa, or I'm in that Cafe Nero, whatever. And then I can take a photo about my coffee along with my receipts. You get the better allocation in terms of the rewards. Or there's another one they call Super Shot campaign, which, in some of the week, some of the time period of time, you can go to a specific coffee brand. For example, you go to ED Coffee, and you get even more rewards as like a marketing campaign for that coffee shop. So we call it super shots. So in terms of user journey, it's pretty easy. And by the way, recently Mugshot also adopted the third-party social logon. So you can log on with your Apple accounts, or you can log on with your Google accounts. So it kind of opened the door to even non-crypto user. You don't necessarily to own the wallet, but you can use a little bit of custodian service and social logon, and you can start to use that right away. Actually, some of my friends and families, they are not crypto user, but they start to use that because of this. My mom actually loved that. My mom is a 70 years old Chinese lady, doesn't speak English, but since the last trip, he visited Milan with me and start to grow a habit like a cappuccino. he likes to drink cappuccino. So I told her like, okay, use a mugshot and you can earn some rewards. And he really enjoyed that.
That's super exciting. I think, you touched on the importance of getting the UX right and the user journey, and I completely agree. We talk about it all the time, but I'm honestly really enamored by the whole approach that you're taking with these X2 and apps. And the way I see it is very much around micro actions that are being micro incentivized, right? And I think that's an idea that has been around for a long time, but Web3 is now really making it mainstream. So if one example, well, we've got a couple examples in the UK. I'll show. We had the plastic bag charge introduced, however long ago, 10, 15 years or something like that. And the impact of that. So, every time you go in, it's only a small change. It's like it was 5 or 10p. But I looked up that and it's reduced it by something like 7.5 billion plastic bag sales per year, right? Or, something like 98% of the actual total. So it's absolutely huge. But back in those times, that was a penalty, right? It wasn't an incentive. And now we're seeing these incentive schemes. And, we've got one coming in Scotland for plastic recycling for bottles where they're giving you back 20 pence on what you paid for the drink, right? So these things are now becoming a lot more mainstream. So yeah, I think the future is very bright for those apps, and I hope they do take off.
Just mentioned about the very two, let's say, key points about why we wanted to, design and build the VeBetterDAO as the new way to incentivize people to do the right thing. One is, for example, actually many other traditional corporations, they call it a campaign. Like, with a certain period of time, they organize a campaign like, okay, don't use the plastic bags or don't use paper cups. And if you use the recycled ones, we want to reward you. Actually, there is a similar campaigns in the traditional world, but usually they run it in a period of time. Why? Because try to verify the actions, it's quite difficult. It was difficult. So they wanted to limit to only to one location or one period of time, and use the extra force to organize the campaign and try to grow the habit. However, this type of thing, it should be on a daily basis. You shouldn't just do like for this week or for that month. No, you should do it every day, right? It's a huge amount of, let's say, collective and accumulative value coming from your daily actions. And the Web3 just make it possible. Use the IoT to digitalize your activity and use a smart contract to verify your actions, and also smart contract to guarantee your rewards. And then boom, it can be done like on a daily basis. It could be reaching outreach to everyone. Not necessarily, you have to be in London, you have to be in Paris, you are able to participate in that type of things. It can be decentralized way. So that's number one, when we think about how to design the VeBetterDAO. And the other thing is about a penalty. Penalty is always showing the negative thing, right? It's like, it kind of make every user become like a bad boys. Right? Like, okay, you do bad things, so I want to punish you. It's not really I would say it's not right a gamification to grow user that kind of behavior, that kind of habits. And then we all know like a positive education is much more effective, right? So instead of punishing anyone, we say, okay, we incentivize you to do something positive thing, not only, financially. Financially is you get a token rewards, but also you get this kind of accomplishments, or you are part of the big movement. One functionality I give idea to Mark Shaw actually is every time when you finish the drinking of coffee with Mark Shaw, you should see a tree map saying like how much percentage you are saving one tree, along with maybe 10,000 people, 20,000 people, across the whole world. It gives the user accomplishment like, okay, I'm really doing something meaningful as something valuable, right? And I'm doing the good things for the whole world, not only just for me or for my family, that kind of thing. So this kind of positive thinking or positive behavior change can really make the user grow that kind of habit, and eventually will drive the business demands or business leverage to those enterprise. Those enterprise should, start to produce more recycled products, or to lower the cost of the recycled products, and able to make the sustainability implementation more inclusive, not exclusive. Right now, if you think about sustainability, most of the users were like, yeah, it's a good thing, but too expensive, I cannot afford that. So we want to really change that kind of thing from fundamental root points, that kind of scenario.
At first, when you were talking about that mugshot feature there, like the idea to show people what their contribution is, the word that comes to mind, I imagine, often is gamification. But it seemed more and more the way you describe it, it's actually deeper than that. And it's more about like combining with community and showing like the overall effect that many people can make. And at the end of the day, we are such tribal community-based creatures. So I think we've kind of seen there's been so many failures when it comes to sustainability because we have these single points of failure at the top,
100%.
or centralized, governments that are too laggard to actually make the decisions.
Yeah.
So I think like a big thing that I imagine you're seeing is this network effect where you get more and more people talking about this, like your mom drinking the coffee, and then who does she talk to, and like you kind of get this spiraling effect of more people, and even just having the conversations a lot to be like, oh, actually, coffee cups are bad for the environment, and most people from an education standpoint probably don't know that. Like I didn't know that before this call.
Yeah,
And you
well,
go into it.
actually, if you see the result, it's really, really impressive. I mean, think about like how many paper cups has been used around the world every year. 16 billion paper cups, coming from 6.5 million trees. So that means if you cut half of consumption of the paper cups used every week and keep doing that every year, you are part of the big group of people saving more than 3 million trees every year. So think about the value of the 3 million trees. Right. And another direction, I'm really glad, Alec, you brought this up. Another direction is we also wanted to make the building external application so much easy, like very easy. I give Antonio OKR target or goals is within 2 weeks. It doesn't matter if you are a developer or what kind of a developer, or you may not be just a developer. You may just a normal user. If you want to build anything like X to earn, fitting your life, fitting your neighborhood, your people to know, you should use only less than 2 weeks. You are able to deliver X to earn applications, and then you can build something and running like that to serve the people around you, serve the people or territory you are familiar with. Even you could have multiple different mugshots or multiple different Cleanify, NFBC. Why not? It's the power of decentralization.
Yeah, I like that. Like, it shouldn't just be that you say developers who are solving these problems. Like, anyone can have a problem. I love the idea of like reducing the friction. And obviously a big thing, like obviously blockchain comes into that, the idea of decentralization, empowering individuals. But AI is more and more coming into that fold as well, where, the goals of so many companies now is to basically remove the need potentially for developers, not entirely, but to reduce the need for developers. So any, Joe off the street can be like, I want to build an app. This is what I want to build. Go build it for me. I can run it. That's really powerful. And kind of on that, you've touched on emerging technology and like the future and all this kind of stuff, but what are you most excited for the future of VeBetterDAO? Like, are there any big things in your mind that you want to incorporate, that you want to leverage, build on, upgrade to?
I think it's what I'm so far really exciting is about the user participations. From right now, like we just run a little bit more than a month after the mainnet launch, 2 months, literally 2 months after the mainnet launch. And we already see like so many users coming from so many different countries, different cities. Actually, we just did a little bit of analysis. The first month, like from July 1st to the first week of August, like 4 or 5 weeks, and we can see 90,000 weekly active users who participate in the governance, who are voting every week, decide which application should get how many allocations. And most important thing, interesting part is those are people coming from 3,000 cities, from 137 different countries. So basically, if you look at the world map, it's kind of like everywhere. You got people everywhere into that, despite the languages, the cultures, the geographical location, or even the behavior. It doesn't matter. Everybody is looking, coming into that place and start to like that. And also another thing is, when we talk to people in person, and everybody loved this idea. Whatever is a big corporation or huge institutional investors. Give an example. In the Hive, we have someone from Franklin Templeton, right, come over to make a very impressive speech. Basically, it's kind of like from the institutional investor side, what they try to do with the sustainability implementations or sustainability challenges, which is 100% aligned what we're doing in VeBetterDAO. So when we talk to them in person, they really like it. They really like, oh, that's a really something we should do, right? We have been looking for as a viable application, creating the real value in the crypto space, other than just speculation trading. So the other, let's say, I will consider as a challenge is how we can make more people to understand that, how we can make more people to know about this and start to be part of the user, be part of the builders, even part of the promoters. So I still quite be persistent in our goal. I believe VeBetterDAO going to be like 1 billion user that kind of platform someday. And for sure, we're gonna start with the first 500,000 user, first 10 million user, and 100 million user, and eventually reach to 1 billion user. But I would say this narrative is just the same for everyone in the world. Again, despite your language, despite your culture, geographical location, you can be part of the user, part of the builder, part of the promoter, and eventually, I really exciting about how big this platform could be and how much value it can really create. More than just the 3 million trees every year. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's a really nice visionary place to end the episode, I think. And I'm really now seeing where Antonio is getting it from with his big grand vision when he spoke to us, because I completely agree. You're very well placed to take advantage and improve and help this groundswell that we're seeing of people actually taking sustainability seriously, right? Like, political parties are much bigger that are single issue on this topic now. I think we're in that phase now where there's so many people that care about it. It's an 8 billion person problem. So why can't you have a billion users of this kind of thing? I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing.
Get 15% of people, right? Not much.
Exactly. It's you're aiming low, some people would say, but no, we'll see where it goes in the future. So Sunny, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I've really learned a lot today. As I said, we're coming to the end, but we always like to end this show with a couple of common questions that we ask everybody, and we like to compare what answers we get. So I'll ask you the first one if you're ready.
Sure.
So in one sentence, let's say we're talking to that 5-year-old again, that very intelligent 5-year-old. They understand DAOs, but we want to take a step back. How would you explain to them in just one sentence, what is Web3 to you?
Oh, that's a tough one, actually, to a 5-year-old. I would say Web3 is just another advanced version of internet. And now, especially those young people, kids, like my daughter, play the internet every day. They kind of enjoy the internet even without knowing how it works and everything. So I just tell them, the Web3 is just a next level of the internet, and you're gonna see lots of the changes coming from that even without knowing that. So yeah, that's still a very tough one, very tough question.
Well, whenever anyone asks me, when I go and see friends and they ask me what you do, I always struggle with explaining it. So I think maybe I'll just use that one in the future. That's much simpler.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final question then is, so let's say you're having a kind of dream dinner party, and you could pick anyone on the planet. They could be from throughout history or even a fictional character to sit down at this party and discuss Web3 with. Then who would you pick and why?
Oh, another tough one. I would say Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs is the one to inspire me a lot. All of his stories, even back and forth to Apple, and insist his vision, create the best product for the whole world. And it's very, let's say, well, I don't know what kind of the word could describe the guy. I think most of the people get it. But I really wanted to, let's say, try to pick his brain about, like, he's the one to create a lot of the amazing things in the internet arrows. And if we got a chance, I really wanted to, let's see how he could do in a Web3 world, and how he could understand the crypto, understand the blockchain, the Web3 mentality, the DAO, and see how can bring, create something similar like Apple, like iPhone, iPod, into the Web3 world. And actually, that's kind of my goal. I believe VeBetterDAO could be acting as like Apple Store, right? And we should have more and more X2 applications which support the sustainability, and eventually make the big platform. The only thing we want to do differently with Apple is we're not going to charge every application like 30%.
I'm surprised that's the first time we've heard Steve Jobs on the podcast. That's a great answer. I think crypto and blockchain has been missing that kind of person, the UX user-centric person.
Yeah, the first impression, the first idea, actually, I was thinking about Elon Musk, but then I think about, wow, he's already into Dogecoin. That's fine, we move on.
He knows about crypto, I'm sure. It would be an interesting one to have a conversation with. Thank you, Sonny. This has been a really epic episode. I've learned so much. For anyone who's listening, we'll link VeBetterDAO. If you've got an idea for an X2N, if you've got an idea for sustainability app, you should go there. Maybe you can pitch it. Maybe it can get funded and launch on VeBetterDAO in the future. I'm trying to work out how we can have some kind of podcast to earn app, Jack. Let's see if we can get that someday. But no, thank you so much for joining us, Sonny. And thank you to those listening, wherever you may be. Join us next time to untangle a little more of Web3. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Untangling Web3.
Don't forget to send us your thoughts, questions, and comments on social media. And be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast provider to catch the next episode. See you next time to untangle a little bit more of Web3.
The views we express here are our own and do not reflect the views of our employers.